Welcome back to another Riftbound recap, and today we have an entire week's worth of spoilers to talk about. Now, if you don't follow me on Twitter, you might have missed it, but there was 3 different TCGs that launched this week, and I help out at the local level, either doing demos or helping organize various events between multiple stores that I work with, so it's just been a bit chaotic to say the least, so I apologize that the uploads have been a little scuffed. And then while we're talking about it, keep in mind that Gen Con is at the end of this month as well, so that's going to be another week where uploads are going to be a little bit light. But overall, I'm very excited for, of course, everything Riftbound and Union Arena going forward. And the important thing to note about that is next week is the end of spoiler season. So by the time I'm recording this video next week, we'll have the last 70 odd cards or whatever it is. Now, I probably won't do all 70 whenever they do that final dump of like probably 50 plus cards, but I'll pull out some key highlights. And then after that's done, I can finally work on the bigger project that I want to be doing of just having starter lists for every single legend, which is going to take a while to both record and edit and all that stuff, just because I need to refine the list. But a lot of that to come in the future. And of course, still trying to do some gameplay video where I can. So lots more Riftbound content to come. Again, apologize for the gap here, but with that out of the way, let's talk about all the spoilers we got. So up first, we have Albus Feros, a 4 energy, 3 might unit. When you play me, spend any number of buffs. For each buff spent, channel 1 rune exhausted. Now, this card got a lot of flack, and I do understand to a point, because it does require a little bit of setup, and our card that we're going to talk about at the very end of this video, we didn't really have a lot of either go tall or go late style of things that Sett really cared about, right? All the decks, and especially our gameplay video that we covered already for Sett, have been very low to the ground, very aggressive in nature, and really just wanted to have some key sticky threats early that build up a board advantage over turn, especially with like the yellow Sett. This is a card that wants to be in a deck that wants to ramp up, and honestly puts us in a good position when combined with some of the other spells we've seen get added in this last week, or just even Arena Bar, kind of the Sett staple. We can actually ramp up reasonably well. And if we're looking for a more late game top end strategy with Sett, again, keeping in mind because our units can be so sticky, this is actually a great enabler for that strategy. Now, I don't think we're quite there yet, but we have seen a couple more cards that at least get me interested in the idea of a more body-focused Sett, or again, much more leaning towards the late game style. So, unfortunately, this is a card that is either going to be, you have to play it because that strategy actually turned out to be good, or this has a home nowhere, and we have to wait for Sett 2 or Sett 3 for this maybe to get a few more cards. So I'll be curious to see where this one lands overall, but for right now, it's hopefully the rest of the spoiler season makes it decent. Now, another card that wasn't all that excited about at first, but it fits where it needs to fit, is a 2 energy, 2 power spell. It is only on your turn, doesn't have action timing, but Falling Star, do this twice, deal 3 damage to a unit. Now, Kai'Sa does need early removal. We have seen things like Void Seeker, which is really nice because it deals 4 damage, which has been a break point, and draws you a card. Now, with Falling Star, we do have the double power cost, which can set us back an entire turn. However, with Kai'Sa and her reaction ability, it's only going to cost 1 power, as we talked about in our previous videos and setting up for the Kai'Sa deck. You are most likely going to be running one of these seals anyways. So in this case, if we find ourselves in a more aggressive meta and we really want to lean on this card, well, we're going to be playing a 3 of the Fury runes just because, or Fury Sigils, excuse me, to pay for that power cost. And, you know, at least Kai'Sa can help out some of that where you might not have the options otherwise, because it's sending yourself back an entire turn really messes with your curve, right? So I love this card as an option for Kai'Sa. Maybe even just sideboard for now. We'll have to see where the finalized list shapes up, because the aggressive decks can be pretty strong at getting out early, but a lot of their key breakpoints early on are 3 or 4 might. So I think this can find a home, but when we think about things like Annie, right? Or if we go to the other style of champions that care about the other removal they might have access to, you are just not using it, right? This is definitely a card that's going to take a little bit more work to see what other decks might get value out of the Fury Seals as well that still can make this a sideboard option. But for at least right now and where Kai'Sa's deck wants to be. This is one that I think might not even be good enough depending on how the meta shapes up, just because of the double power cost, but is absolutely going to be a sideboard staple, knowing that decks like Darius and like Jinx do exist. Now, again, keeping in mind, a lot of the Fury cards that we've seen have Assault, so while they are very strong on offense, they are very weak to both defensive, just taking over the battlefield again, right? Or just any type of removal. Now, the last thing I do want to note here that is different about this card, and the other reason why it might find a home in the main deck, is that it does not have the battlefield clause like we do see on a lot of other removals. So typically with the Darius deck, you are going to be taking battlefields very quickly, trying to be very efficient with your units, and then retreating them back to your base, right? To protect them so you can do a bigger might swing on the follow-up turn with the Assault or with like a Darius combo or something. So Falling Star does allow us the option to knock out a couple units in the base, which does make up to a degree for the double power cost. So I will be very curious to see if this finds a home outside of Kai'Sa, but at least for right now, you are excited to have the option in Kai'Sa. Again, I have to keep adding the caveat depending on how the meta lines up, but absolutely going to be a key staple sideboard card. Moving on from there, we have a 6 energy, 1 power spell, Progress Day, draw 4 cards. Not a lot to say about this. Drawing cards is great. 6 energy is a little bit, but pretty much any mind champion or legend deck is going to use this because you want to have either cost reduction effects that you might have in the deck. We have a couple key units that allow us to reduce the cost of spells, which can be really nice. But ultimately, we just need to refill our hand as control decks, right? As the Ahri deck, you do have a bunch of calm options that are cycling through them. The Kai'Sa deck, which is likely going to play the Apprentice anyways, can reduce this, and we have things like Lux that can also reduce spells, right? So there's a couple different ways that we can really get a bit more value out of just these pure draw 4, but the control decks of the format are going to need to find a way to bring this back, their hand size back up, so they have more options to use over the course of that match. Now, we have to wait and see what the right number is, but I could absolutely see this being a 1 to 2 of in the main deck for, quite honestly, every mind deck, at least in set 1. Again, I do think something like Kai'Sa is going to get a little bit more value out of it, just because, again, we can pay the power cost off of the legend ability. We have the Apprentice, which is going to reduce costs anyways. Lux can actually make this a draw 5, which is really cool, actually, right? So there's a couple things that you can do with this, but I have to imagine that it'll still find a home. That's kind of the part why I'm showing Ahri here as just a larger discussion around, yes, Kai'Sa and Lux likely get the most value out of this from a overall set design standpoint, but do not be surprised if this finds a home in some of these other decks. And keep in mind, as I just mentioned the caveat with a aggro-centric meta, if we have a control-focused meta, shocker, you're going to be playing this in your sideboard as well. Not saying that you're probably going to go up to 3 copies always, but you will want 2 to 3 depending on the matchup from a more sideboarding option that we have, right? So this is one that I'm excited to see again where it places, but as I've been playing the Teemo deck personally, and I'm playing a much more heavy control variant instead of like all in on the hidden package, you just desperately need extra draw cards at the end of the day. We did get a big spell for Teemo, or big unit, I should say, for Teemo as well here that I'm excited to see how it changes up the list a little bit, but Progress Day is a very welcome addition for the Mind card pool. Now, probably one of the most exciting things I'm for, because how it combos with another card specifically, is going to be a 2 energy spell, Fight or Flight. It does have Hidden, and it has the action ability as well. So you have a ton of control of how you're using this, but move a unit from a battlefield to its base. One of the difficult parts with the Teemo deck is that we only got one option, unless you're running Bandle Tree, right, of placing a hidden card down. And this is a great way to hold a battlefield by forcing one of your opponent's cards to go back to base. And if they didn't do their might math correctly, you're likely just going to get free removal on the other units that they tried to swing in with. This is going to be a very, very strong hidden effect to be playing. And also, just in general, going beyond that, right? Something like Jinx can also get a lot of value out of this by just sending a unit. Now, keep in mind that it's not just your enemy unit, right? You can protect something of your own. This does have the kind of built-in Reaver's Row effect where if your opponent tries to commit to a battlefield and you know you don't have the right might numbers or just the right amount of interaction that you wanted, just retreat your own unit. That's totally fine as well, right? Your opponent had to maybe then overcommit to that battlefield because they weren't sure of what hidden card they had to play around. And also with the Teemo deck in general, just having more hidden cards is always welcome for the Nocturne or blue Teemo that we want to be playing anyways, right? In terms of just revealing more cards and getting more battle trick options. So yeah, Fight or Flight, this might be one of the more exciting cards that we've had revealed, just because it's not completely all in for one legend, but does have quite a bit of versatility baked into it. This will be one of the more cards played in the Origin set. So again, probably one that if you want to get foils of, might be a good one to scout out early. Now, we knew a mind finisher of some sort was going to happen, and well, we got it in Mundo, right? So 8 energy, 2 power, 6 might unit. Mundo's might is increased by the number of cards in your trash, and at the start of your beginning phase, recycle 3 from your trash. So an important note here, right, is when you recycle multiple cards at a time, they do get shuffled and then put to the bottom, so you can't stack the bottom of your deck like in Flesh and Blood or other card games. And then let's talk about an 8 cost for only 6 might, right? This does seem very lackluster, underpowered compared to a lot of the other top end finishers, especially when we're considering a double power cost baked into this. However, if you think about where this is trying to fit, right, either in the Ahri deck that is going to cycle through its deck very quickly with a bunch of those column cards that are constantly going to the trash and building it up, you would not be surprised to find this to be an 11, a 12, or a 13 might card by the time that you're ultimately trying to resolve this as a body that sticks on the board. Now, again, that's going to be good enough for a lot of situations, because on your next turn, when you're actually promoting out this guy, or maybe you held the battlefield anyways, right, and you just wanted extra might to it, your opponent is going to have to really overcommit to try to remove Mundo. And a lot of times when you're playing these slower control style of decks, you just need a turn or two to stabilize, and having a 14 power Mundo Shocker is going to do that for you. Your opponent is going to have a big time wall that they're going to have to climb, unless they have like a Draven, right? That is the one caveat I'll add here is, boy, I've been playing against a lot of Draven lately, and I already hate that guy. Draven's going to, go up against Mundo quite well, but generally speaking, a lot of other decks will have to rely on either a Hidden Blade or some type of very hard removal that just says kill a unit, or they'll have to spend a lot of, if they're in Fury, they'll have to do a lot of cleave or duos to get extra might just to get up to that power to trade with Mundo, right? And then maybe they have 1 unit left that they can go and conquer the battlefield that way. So there's a lot of work that has to be done once you stick a Mundo correctly. But this is another card that you are likely sitting in a 1 to 2 of situation. I also should make the caveat here that I think this is also good for Lux that wants to churn through a lot of cards as well and just have a lot of removal. So then Mundo also helps you recycle that removal back into your deck, and then you're likely hitting the extra draw cards as well, right? So there's that side of it too, but I think Mundo is definitely a card that at first glance might not seem all that important or exciting. And, to be fair, maybe it's still not that exciting, but in terms of mine finally getting a finisher, I think Dr. Mundo does a good enough job for what we were looking for, right? We are in mine, so we are going to have a very full trash. So Dr. Mundo here can actually do quite a bit of work. So I'm not sure quite yet which legend is going to get the most use out of it. Again, there's going to be the side of Ahri, which is going to cycle through your deck a lot faster because of all the calm cards. But then you also have Teemo, which is burning through hidden cards potentially turn after turn after turn, right? So I could see a couple different areas where this fits, but we will have to wait and see overall. Now, I have been very kind to a lot of cards in spoiler season because we have been waiting for either more context or just other cards to be revealed, what have you. But Divine Judgment is the first card that I will just very openly say, please do not play this. It's probably fine for a multiplayer setting, but this is one that, look, this is the cope that I could put together with it, but I'm still not all that excited for it. So we have Divine Judgment, a 7 energy, 2 power spell that says each player chooses 2 units, 2 gear, 2 runes, and 2 cards in their hand. Recycle the rest, right? So in a multiplayer setting, you might have won the die roll and won the lottery of, I am going to have both Aurora and Arena Bar on my field, right? You are probably winning the game anyways if you have your Aurora stick around for more than a couple turns. But let's say that you are just a very fun person and wanted to make everyone at the table suffer a little bit more. Well, Divine Judgment is exactly the card for you. And that's about the best scenario that I could possibly put together for Sett, right? Sett has the ability to protect your bigger cards. So in theory, if you play that more late game style of Sett deck that I mentioned up front, you're going to be able to put yourself in a position where you say, okay, I have two very large units on the battlefield. They have buffs. Sett is going to say, hey, you guys can stick around a little bit longer because I can just protect you with my effect. And you maybe win the game that way, right? This card definitely feels like it is a something in the future, means that we're going to be more excited for this, hopefully. But ultimately, this is something that is more for like a multiplayer reset and trying to, bring things back together to parity, as it were. But some decks are clearly going to be a lot stronger into this, like a Volibear at the table, right? If you're going up against Volibear, this is going to feel really bad unless you get it out under before they had a chance to ramp up a bunch of things. And even then, like, right? So there are like very niche cases where this might find a home, but just one that I was not excited about from a 1v1 setting. But again, maybe there's some multiplayer shenanigans you can bring it up with. So battlefields, of course, making a key option here in Riftbound in terms of changing every single game that you play. And so we got the Dreaming Tree. The first time you choose a friendly unit with a spell here, each turn draw a card. This is just nuts for any calm type of legend that says now all my, buff spells are either, well, drawing two in the case of Discipline, I guess, but I'm now getting an extra card draw because I want to hold this. So Master Yi, Ari, Lee Sin, all of them love this card. So this is automatically one that I'm sure if you are playing a calm legend, this is automatically one of your three because you are just going to see everything that you want with this card and draw an absurd amount of extra cards over the course of the game. And again, I promise I'm going to do that video eventually, but this is a more legend positive style of battlefield, meaning that only a certain section of the legend pool can truly, really benefit from this effect. Now, technically, if you use like Hidden Blade on your own guy, that's also going to count in this case. Then you're drawing three cards. But let's be honest, in the 99.9% of the time world here, you are playing a calm deck and very excited to see this. So we'll have to wait and see. There are some of the other like buff style of cards in order, but there's only a very narrow handful of them here. So, and like some of the other like challenge effects you want to play from your base, so then you're not controlling the battlefield. Yeah, there are, again, some of those other more niche interactions, but Calm is really going to be the one that gets the most value out of this. And we'll have to wait and see if there's any other type of either buff effects out of order, or if there's other types of spells that ultimately care about holding specifically at the battlefield, where, again, some of the fight spells are just, you want to do it from your base because you're trying to stabilize and make sure your opponent doesn't hold the battlefield. So, excited for this card. I think it is absolutely going to be one of the better battlefields that we have in Set 1, but we have to wait and see where those finalized lists go. Now, the card that I'm really excited about, because Teemo desperately needed something in the like 4 to 5 might range before you get to Blue Kaisa, before we get to, well, I guess in this case now, before we get to Mundo, right, is now going to be Ava, a 5 energy 4 might unit that reads, when I attack, you may pay 1 mind power, so cycle a rune to the bottom, to play a card with hidden from your hand here, ignoring the cost. Now, we talked about it earlier, but actually just insane for fight or flight, because Teemo has a very hard time recapturing some battlefields. So this is a very great way for us to line up a turn where we can go remove their biggest body, control the battlefield again, and then go boop and get our hidden back right away. So I'm absolutely positive that we're going to see more hidden cards in the future, or next week, I should say, once we get the full spoilers. But this is another card that I am just now windmill slamming as a 3 of in my Teemo deck. You're always happy to see this. The fact that it can just do so much with the hidden cards that we have already. Yes, Teemo stonks to the moon. I'm very happy that we are getting more support in this way. And it's totally not just because it's one of my favorite decks, at least to play so far, but we needed a card like this. And again, just speaking from the very narrow example of fight or flight doing so much for us, but sometimes just getting a free draw too, right, for a single power, that's also fine, like if we're playing Consult the Past. So again, any card that allows us to effectively cheat out the main engine or core of what our deck wants to be doing is going to be great. I wish it had 5 might instead of 4 if I'm going to nitpick about something, but it is a mine card, which traditionally are going to have a lower might, threshold to them. So that's fair. We'll take it. But absolutely wonderful card. Very excited to see where it lands. Now, a card that, admittedly, I don't know why it exists, but a 3 energy double power Kraken Hunter for 5 might. Volibear, one of their key weaknesses early on is that they didn't have a good might unit to play. And shocker, because this has 5 might instead of 4 for some reason, you actually get to channel one of those runes back. And Volibear desperately needed a early character that they could play that now also combos very well with their key removals, the Sky Splitter. So this is one that, yep, it's automatically a 3 of Involi. I think it's also just fine in some of the other decks because it has the Assault. And what's really interesting too is that, the third effect that we should actually talk about, as you play me, you may spend any number of buffs as additional cost, reduce my power for each buff you spend, right? So this also just goes in Sett for the lower to the ground side of it that you're really happy. This now gets us another curve option where we went Cithria, Shaman, and now we can go Cithria into this. So really cool to see that we have more options for Sett as well. And I'm sure for like the more aggressive builds of Sett, it's going to find a home. It's totally fine, whatever, right? But for who is the biggest winner and who is always excited to see his card, it's Volibear by a mile. And not much more to say about that, right? It is a early 5 cost unit that we can play. Only is going to cost us 1 power. And it gives us a total of 5 might for our removal spell that we want to be using. Yeah, this pretty much completely, well, I shouldn't say completely, but this fixes like 80% of Volibear's early game that now if you don't want to do the all-in super high roll RNG, pray for the Aurora style of deck, you can play a much more honest Volibear game. That's just fine. So I was kind of hoping we would see that payoff between the like all-in high roll gambling. If you hit your right ramp pieces, it's great, versus like just the more fair ramp style. But all right, we got the fair ramp style as well. And between the two of those, I'm sure from a consistency factor is going to play the bigger role. So the more fair version of Volibear is likely going to come out ahead, but that was probably going to happen with Sett 2 either way, just because of a deeper card pool. But again, of course, there's still 70 more odd cards to go at the time of recording this, so there could be a few more cards. But Volibear, congratulations. You got 3 of staple that you're always going to run until the end of time. I don't know when this card would get replaced in Volibear, to be perfectly honest. And that's fine as well. But again, I think also it would be a disservice to not mention that Sett also loves this card. Moving on from there, we got green Leona. So 6 energy, 1 power, 6 might. If your opponent is within 3 points of the victory score, she enters ready, which is really nice. And then stunned enemy units here have -8 might to a minimum of 1. So this is great for a couple different reasons, right? One of the challenges that we really saw with the Leona deck is that your Volibear matchup could be very rough because, yes, you can stun something, which means you can get some amount of damage against a unit or just hold the battlefield for a turn, but you didn't have a way to remove them realistically, right? Like, yes, there's Hidden Blade and some of the more hard removal we could lean into, but it always felt bad, especially when we have to deal with things like the deflect on top of it. So we just wanted one more key option that could help us remove some key threats. So especially even like a Lee Sin, if you might be battling into it, who wants to stack up their buffs, the green Leona allows you to set up a combo where, yes, you still have to burn a stun card, but you can effectively remove something. And what's really interesting is, well, this works out quite well with the yellow version as well. That says when I attack, stun a enemy unit here. So by the 2 of these attacking together, not only are you going to have 10 might on a battlefield, which is just good by itself, you're able to stun, remove something, and most likely have enough to ready up and have runes available for like a discipline or something if you need to make up for the other might. So this is a very dangerous combo for a lot of decks. And the other thing I think that's worth noting here is that a lot of, I guess other than Teemo, right? A lot of the champion units that we've seen so far have really felt like they want to go in 2 different directions for a deck. Jinx being another great example of this, but I think Leona and Teemo are like the 2 in Set 1 that says, no, you want to run both of these. You are most likely, well, in the Teemo deck, you're running 3 and 3. This might be like a 2-3 split, in favor of the yellow Leona instead, just for the more early board control style. But These cards actually pair together insanely well, so I'm very curious to see what the Leona deck is going to look like once we get the last little bit of spoilers, because this was a pretty insane pickup in my opinion, just from an overall meta health standpoint, and where Leona just needed a little bit of buffs in that regard. So again, very excited for this card, and don't forget with Leona's legend ability, you're going to get a buff counter for when you're using the stun effect, so this is actually going to go up to a 7 might because you already got a buff on this. So sorry, that's actually 12 might technically on a battlefield when you're attacking with both of them. So again, a very good number to hit, and likely able to remove whatever your opponent's key threat is because you're able to shrink their might overall. Now, I do love me some Porros, and I gotta give a shout out here to Porro Herder. When you play me, if you control a Porro, buff me and draw a card, and it's a 3 energy, 1 power, 3 might unit. So 3 energy, 4, and then hopefully in most cases, gonna go up to 4 might in this regard. Now, this one's a little bit interesting because we have seen Master Yi want to have, I should say, shield units that do crazy things with his effects. So in this case, we'll just use the Stalwart Porro as a example, right? A 2 energy, 2 might unit that has shield +1, but when that defends alone, it's actually going to go up to a 5 might unit for only 2 power, which on effectively your turn 2 is an insane amount of might to hold a battlefield. And then also when you're playing the Calm Legends, right, you have more defensive options. So I like this because it lines up a turn for us quite well, that we can go Stalwart Porro into Porro Herder and then put them on different battlefields. And Porro Herder is going to be a 6 might, again, comboing it with Master Yi's effect, unit, right, to hold with. And you're also drawing a card. So this is one of those things that's like, how many more Porros are we really going to get that matter for this? Are we going to see the return of the Porro King? Have to wait and see, but this is more of the nice to have sort of thing, but very curious to see where this lanes. So not a lot more to say about that. I think Porro Herder is just fine in this regard. If we get even another playable Porro that lines up with where this wants to go, I think you're in very good shape. But surprisingly, I think a lot of people will agree, is Master Yi is better than a lot of us gave credit to early on. And, I said I was already a little higher on it, but with the tournaments that have been happening and watching some of the other plays with the Master Yi deck, I got to give him a little bit more love. And then last but not least, we have Sett Brawler, the 5 energy, 1 power, 4 might unit. When I'm played and when I conquer, buff me. So very important on when conquer as well. Spend my buff, give me +4 this turn. So a lot of people hated this card on reveal, and I kind of get it, right? In the Sett deck that everybody is playing today, this doesn't seem that exciting, right? The current version of Sett is all about yellow Sett. You care about a very go wide style of strategy and getting buffs on multiple units to make your yellow Sett just never die. Now, it is nice to know that this does have the buff when it comes into play, so it's automatically going to buff itself, so it does go to 5 might, and it can give you a +4 might swing when you need it. Now, something to keep in mind is that we have things like Showstopper, which can push him to a battlefield immediately, so you're able to align this on a turn, on like a 6 energy turn, for example, to have it come in with a buff, spend the buff, go up to 8, Showstopper up to 9, and then still have a way to either protect it or just have 9 power crashing against whatever your opponent's doing. This is kind of nuts, actually, for the more go tall style of Sett. So this is, again, to the counterpoint of Leona, where a lot of other decks have been very different in what they want to be doing. Leona was very, synergistic between the two. I think this is another case where Sett, the two versions are just so different on what they want to be doing. And I am honestly very high on this card. Now, I might be biased because I'm just very high on Sett in general, and I think Sett is one of the better legends so far, and more spoilers might change that, but this is kind of everything that we really wanted in terms of like a solo unit that can just go crash into a battlefield and take it out while we're stacking up the other one. So I think this does actually have a home in the go wide Sett list, like a lot of people have argued against. But I think where this is truly going to shine is going to be in more of that late game strategy where we saw the Albus up front and just getting a much more ramp heavy option for the buff units that we want to be playing. So I like Sett. Let me know your comments down below. What is your favorite card from the spoilers of this batch? Again, I've just been super busy with all the demos going on, helping out various stores, so apologize that the uploads have been a little bit scuffed lately, but lots more Riftbound content to come in the near future. So until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.